Hey everyone, I'm joined by Rob Teller today. We're talking about problems in the case industry, lack of innovation in the case industry. Rob worked as a former, PM at NZXT?
Case PM at NZXT. PM.
So has experience designing things like the H440, yes or no?
Yep, H440, S340, and then going further back, Phantom 530, Source 530, H630,
lots of cases.
Switch 810, Phantom 820. I was in the mix for a while.
Yeah, so he's got about 7 years of experience in the game with cases. I've been working with them for a long time. I'm not fully satisfied with where cases are in the industry in general right now, so I thought we could just lay some problems out or talk about where the current direction is. Before getting to that, this content is brought to you by the Thermaltake Flow RGB closed loop liquid cooler, which is a 360 millimeter radiator plus 3120 fans that are RGB illuminated. The Thermaltake rain fans at that. This is a 4.5 gen Azetec pump, which is one of the faster pumps. You can learn more at the link in the description below. Quick note, anything Rob says is his own opinion, so we'll just put that out there.
Yeah.
Not representing a company today. So where do we want to start? I think we were talking about general lack of innovation, which is probably a symptom of a few things.
Yeah.
Like one being how far can you really push a case?
And I feel like a lot of case manufacturers are kind of in their tween years. They some of them gave it like a real hard effort to try to get case innovation, and may not have happened. And then they're like, oh, we'll sell the same amount of cases if we just kind of churn one out anyway.
Right, we'll sell the same amount either way, yeah. And it's not our leading product for a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of these companies have become much more multifaceted. When I joined the industry, I was told to look at Antec and Cooler Master. Antec and Cooler Master were the two biggest case names in the whole industry, and you look at how far we've come. When was the last time you recommended an Antec case for purchase?
Like seriously recommended? Probably.
I know personally I never have, but
well, I did probably the Antec 900 back when it was like the case.
Damn.
When it was brand new,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
that I built in that case. That was probably one of my my second or third personal system. So that's mid 2000s or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. They've got the P8 now, which we're reviewing, but it's got some issues with it as well, just like all the other cases do.
And you can see Antec's trying to break out, but really all they're doing is catching up. They're adding a power supply shroud. They're getting rid of optical drive bays. They're using a little bit less plastic. They're going to a more squared off design. Yep. Like it's not.
There's still a lot of the same tooling though. You can pull bits and pieces out of the cases where you're like, oh, that was in the whatever came out 6 years ago.
Yeah, and if you're gonna start to do that, really all you're doing is playing a numbers game. You're like, all right, can I get all these features in a shared chassis and sell it for $39?
Right.
That's when it gets interesting. But if you're still trying to sell it for like over $100, it's kind of like an insult, I feel like, to the end user, because now someone who's not in the know, someone who may not fully understand what they're trying to purchase might just be like, Antec's good, right?
Yeah, and Antec they were genuinely industry leading.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason that they're referenced, and they were one of the first companies. They might have been the first company to do a non-brown box for the case, like as in art on the box.
Yeah.
That's how old Antec is, and that's how leading edge they were at the time.
My first memories of Antec were always going to Fry's or Micro Center. They had the end caps. They'd have a whole pallet stack of cases, and you'd see it. You're like, that's the case you buy. Like you could get a weirder Zoxide style LED, like super funky, admittedly NZXT back in the day, but you knew if you bought an Antec you'd be fine. And it's not really the case anymore. They kind of resting on their laurels.
Yeah, they've definitely, certainly in terms of perception, have kind of fallen from visibility, I think.
Yeah.
So now you've got companies like Corsair has definitely stepped in a big way.
Sure.
They have a huge following, a lot of fans. They've got some solid designs. They have some flaws like all the other companies. But I feel like where Antec has faded a little bit and fallen back in the industry, there's now Corsair's come forward. NZXT had a big period of growth.
Definitely.
So I don't know, let's start with Corsair next. So what do we think first of all, Corsair was memory.
Yep.
Right? Then they got into things like power supplies where they really did quite well.
Liquid coolers,
cases. So they're one of the multifaceted companies we're talking about.
The Corsair story is one of my favorite, like, Corsair was, for a long time, always just a competitor of mine in the industry, but Corsair's story is always really cool because they managed to come out with the 800D. The 800D was their first foray into cases. At the time, really cases weren't that expensive. Like, no one was really spending that much money on cases.
This was a big halo.
Yeah, it was this huge thing. It had multiple partitions on the inside. It was kind of set up for liquid cooling, what liquid cooling was back in the day. And it felt expensive. Like, they did a great job not feeling like a turnkey case, but bigger. Like, they did an incredible good job in making it feel like if you built a computer in this, it'd be worth more than the sum of its components.
Right, yeah.
And that was really incredible that they went and did that. And then subsequently went on, made like the 600T, which is like a cult favorite of mine. Like, just they started to do things that no one was really thinking about at that time.
Yeah, they pushed hinged doors a lot too.
Yeah,
like, that was pretty new.
Dude, the mechanism on that 800D, I remember being very serious.
Yeah, it was robust. And the 760T, was it, I think, also had the more affordable version of the hinged door.
Yep.
With a full panel acrylic window, and that was pretty new as well. People have certainly done these things in some form or another, but we're talking about bringing it to like mass market enthusiasts.
I seem to fall in love with all the Corsair cases that never really took off in the mainstream. The stuff like the 380T, it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the best optimal use of spending for a case, but it was really cool. Like, you looked at it and you're like, I don't know any other case that looks like this. I don't know anything I could buy that could be comparable to it. And that's why I really like what Corsair was doing with cases for such a long time.
Yeah, so then modern Corsair, we've got things like 400C, 600C. What else do they have right now that's...
Honestly, since they changed the numbering scheme up on these model numbers, it's been really hard for me to follow Corsair in terms of placing a name onto a product.
Well, so generally speaking, what are things that with Corsair, we're talking about Antec, some of the things that they kind of fell on, like cable management, for example. Antec never caught up there. What about Corsair? Where can they improve? Because I think Corsair is one of the few companies where in our testing they routinely do pretty well in thermals. You can't say that for a lot of them.
Yeah, Corsair is definitely the more responsible case leader these days. You're going to get a good product no matter what now. I would say that Corsair is almost the new Antec, that you can't buy a bad Corsair case. Certainly I'll leave that up to you to do the reviewing, but it's really hard to be upset with the product that you get out of Corsair. There could have been improvements, they could have done things better. I'll always think that, of course, but they do a pretty good job. The problem with that is you end up with a middle-of-the-line product in a lot of ways. You don't get a lot of new innovation out of it. Corsair tends to use a design firm for a lot of their solutions. They're not in-house designs.
Right.
Of course, they're managed by Corsair, but middle of the line is really what I seem to get a lot out of it. You get the current trends that are coming up, stuff like glass
decent and inoffensive,
and
functional.
Yeah. They try to be a little funky with stuff. Like, what was the newer boxy case that came out?
The huge one? Or
that had almost like the little alien sculpted. Wasn't that a T?
Yeah. So there's
like 500T.
You talking about like a Computex that just passed?
It's been out for like a year or so. But you get a little bit of funkiness. Enough that it'll sell, that no one's going to be upset with it.
Right.
And then a pretty good case. But I really would love to see Corsair do something really fresh, really new. But this isn't always in their wheelhouse,
Yeah, well, they've gotten with... Corsair seems like they certainly follow trends pretty effectively, not in an offensive or insulting way, but they definitely catch up on trends quickly, which some other companies don't catch up as fast on the trends. That's bad for them. But trend-setting companies, we should probably give Inwin some credit.
Inwin has, and I'm curious how that's actually translating to sales for them, but they came in really hard with the glass. Like, Inwin came to market with glass, and it was the Tau. The Tau was like the first thing they showed at Computex with all that glass.
And they were the first that sticks in my mind with doing tempered glass as seriously as they did. And other companies caught up pretty quickly. I mean, last year's Computex, not 2017, but 2016, had tempered glass on probably 30% of the cases.
Oh, and a lot of the China-sourced direct to customer case manufacturers now too. They figured, we could change the stud on the side panel and put a tempered glass on there.
Jones Bow, for example.
Jones Bow is a great example.
They make the Rosewell Coleman, which is the same as the Anades Crystal.
Yeah. And
a lot of the cases, just like with peripherals, there's a lot of rebrand going on, and companies can differentiate it a little bit. But depending on which company you're looking at, which product it is, like if it's pretty cheap and it looks like it has good features, it's probably because it's sourced from somewhere else.
Sure, and especially like a company with Rosewell, they're banking on good reviews.
Yeah.
So if you get in at a low price and people buy it and they're not unhappy with the amount of money they've just spent for that product, it's going to have great reviews. It's going to have great return business. Lots of people are going to end up consuming that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is like case snobbery type of talking. We're nitpicking here on a lot of these things. It becomes about how much further the industry could have pushed it, and what else could you have gotten more for your money, and
I think airflow is probably one of the biggest problems right now.
Definitely, there's a lot of things being overlooked to get this style, this cost come in under budget.
Well, not even just that. I mean, it's not expensive to cut holes in a case.
True.
So,
but to make it look good, you end up with only a couple scenarios on how to get enough holes and make it look good, and that's usually, either you put vents on the side or you put vents on the top, and then you leave a blank front because mesh is expensive and.
Well, and also there's just a style thing.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks feels like ever since the S340, everyone's trying to do flat, like single color, no mesh front panel.
I'll walk it back even further than that, and I'll give credit to Fractal, because I remember working at NZXT when the Define R2 was out, and then the R3 came out, and it was like, if it was black and nondescript, people were losing their minds over.
Right.
Do you understand how hard it could be to work at NZXT earlier, and then when Fractal becomes a popular thing, and everybody's like, I don't want that transformer, I don't want that color, I don't want that style and ID. Can you just make it simple and
a black box?
Yeah, and not have it not break and be kind of quiet. And dude, Fractal was killing it back then. They're absolutely killing it. Like, I think Fractal contributes as much to Corsair as being the killer of Cooler Master and Antec back in the day. That was a huge bullet in these giant companies, was this simple design. And when NZXT came out with the S340 and the H440, like, it was so hard to try to walk that line of having a unique design that wasn't just the Fractal look.
Yeah, well, especially because ultimately you're trying to differentiate yourself from the OEMs like Dell, someone like that, and their boxes are pretty plain.
Yeah,
plain black box.
They put up a good fight for plain black boxes.
Yeah, and so if that's what you're competing with, you kind of lose sight of the ID of the product. But I mean, on the intake side of things, like pulling recent examples, the Antec P8, the EVGA DG7 that we just looked at, and in the video I was talking about it, DG7, P8, even the Corsair View 21 or 31, whatever it is, not Corsair, Thermaltake View 21 or 31, those cases all have the one thing in common, which is like flat front panel, and then it's like they forgot the other part, which is you have to have mesh.
Yeah.
So to the point where in some of our reviews we'll see the GPU starts dropping clocks unless you set a custom fan curve, and I don't know how much of that is like trying to follow the Fractal and NZXT example without realizing you need a cooling element.
It's like they look at the broader strokes. It's like, all right, simple design, power supply shroud, no plastic, or less plastic, and then try to update it, like, oh well, this case was from 3 years ago. Well, now we have tempered glass. We could take that plus tempered glass. Fuck,
done.
Instant success. Instant success. And really, that's it's frustrating to me, and to most end users, probably not as much. you know, I remember reading the comments to most people were just frustrated it didn't have like rubber grommets. And these were things that always seemed kind of silly to me, but I love that NZXT was able to make such a far leap forward with the H440 and the S340, and it's like we're still kind of stuck in that era right now. That refresh cycles have slowed down for everybody.
Oh yeah, NZXT has been. I mean, their last case was the Manta.
Yeah,
right.
Only
That's
for
not
ITX.
Not even an ATX case.
And you know, everybody has kind of slowed down in what they can put in there, and so you end up with these like refresh with tempered glass.
Yeah.
Refresh with
and power supply shroud.
And power supply shroud.
I mean, even Silverstone. Silverstone has really done a good job at staying the line of, like, our company is about function, to the point where we'll meet up with them at an event. This was probably last year's CES, and the PMs were asking me, and PR asking me, do you think we should add RGB to this? And I was like, I don't know, man. They're like, what do you think about RGB and tempered glass? And they ultimately caved and started adding that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and like, to be fair, Silverstone's been doing Ravens for a while too. It's not like they're not chasing that gamer spec.
Yeah, they definitely chase it, but they do try. Well, like the Raven 02.
Yeah.
You know, it was functional for sure, but it also looks like gamer.
Yeah.
So
50% plastic on there. You know, I think companies definitely struggle without having. I think we've seen that top tier pricing fall off.
Yeah.
Like you can't sell $200 case anymore. Like that's
a Phantom 820.
A Phantom 820 could never exist. Like
Switch 810 was expensive too, right?
Switch 810 was like 180, 170. But things like Cosmos is coming back.
Yeah, C700P.
It's gonna be what, like $300?
$300. So, yeah.
And it's, you could order, like, the feet are really cool, and the side panels are cool, but the interior looks like an erector set. Like it's.
Oh, and it is one.
It's super functional, but
it's completely modular. But you know, not everyone needs that. Kind of like the Be Quiet Dark Base Pro 900. You can do a lot of the same stuff. You can invert the motherboard tray or rotate it, and that gets you up to a $200 or $250 case, which it's got a lot of cool features. Like it's a well-designed case, but also you pay a lot for that functionality.
Yeah, so. When you can do purpose-built correctly, you end up with a much better product that's more for a specific type of customer.
Well, yeah, and even like that's getting into the territory where C700P and Dark Base Pro 900 both have really cool features in that you can, you know, modularize them. I'll say, but. The difference is like where the S340 tries to differentiate by doing clean design and a power supply shroud, these are differentiating by adding features that cost like an extra $100 to buy.
Companies are struggling with being creative under a budget.
Yeah,
that's for sure. You know, S340 and H440 we keep coming back to, and the majority of the money spent on those products and their cost was the tooling.
Yeah.
If you look at them, the tooling, first off, it's not shared with any other case, and there's things they try to reduce the amount of rivet holes, unnecessary holes, just anything that might make the product look more utilitarian, and they try to make it look more like a consumer finished product inside and out. Like everything about it looks tip top, inside sexy, outside sexy.
Well, what do we think of what are the aspects of cases that it seems like companies are spending an unnecessary amount of money on? Like where are the aspects that are, you look at it and you go, that was a poor allocation of spend?
Like in every scenario, this was like, at NZXT it was really great because they were always open to trying and doing things. So, you know, Phantom 820 is a great example of spending a lot of money on features that sound cool. That was a case
I really liked originally, but now I wouldn't give it a good review today.
Exactly, and so it's something like as a person working to develop it, you were like, all right, we've got this great chassis, same chassis as Switch 810. Let's put the new Phantom style on it. Yeah. Let's put interior RGB LED.
And that was new.
Yeah, you had the lighting controller, but the thing is,
200mm fans in the front. I think.
Yep. And at the end of the day, though, what it was a lot of plastic. It was an LED controller that wasn't completely ready for prime time. Yeah. It was way ahead of its time.
It was a Hue version 1, right?
Yeah, Technically, yeah.
Kinda,
you know, the Hue ended up coming out after and being better than the electronics that shipped.
I remember that.
But this is kind of like the fallacy of buying a flagship case. Just like if you were to buy a 10-year-old $100,000 car, it feels old now. Back then, it was like just trying to innovate. And what I like now, why I like these cheaper cases that seem so nice is it's like, all right, what could you do in steel? What could you do with the least amount of material? What could you do to attract the most amount of customers?
Right.
I think that's such a great puzzle to try to make a great end user product. Like, I really like making products, and under $100 to make something so cool.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And if you see, a lot of it's been stripped out. It comes down to core competency right now with cases. You're not getting fan control built into cases. You're not getting LED control built into cases.
Fan control was really popular.
Yeah, that was, it was unnecessary. As a PM, there were things that was like, oh, this is over $100. You have to have rubber grommets. Oh, you have to have fan control. Do you have temperature readouts? Do you have temperature probes? Do you have multiple channels? Do you have how many watts was? It was like a rabbit hole of spending money on things that you're never going to do as well as the discrete product. Like, that's what cases were for such a long time.
Motherboard, or back then 5¼ inch add-ins.
And so, you thought you were adding value by doing things that a case wasn't supposed to do. And now cases have become so much more pure. You don't even have an optical drive to enable these things, and they're still not popular to be built into a case. I like that we're getting back to like a core functionality of the case, but it's been a few years. I'd like to see something really kind of...
Yeah, I know the H500P is really popular right now with viewers and people online. So that one is interesting because it's mixing old and new elements. The old being 200mm fans. Those were so popular with the half-X and like the Phantoms.
The NZXT Phantom.
Yeah. And they just vanished. So
it was such a, dude,
and now they're coming back.
People are trying to bring them back. I don't know if they'll come back.
Well, I think the question is, before you think about, is it good that they're coming back? The question is, why did they go away?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons. I actually, someone asked this on Reddit a couple months ago. I mean, first off, there were two specs. Just like if anybody's ever bought a 140mm radiator, there's like a hole spacing. Like, there are these issues that should have just never existed just because there were multiple manufacturers. And so, like NZXT had one size, and I think they were aligned with another company with like 193 spec, and then there were 180, and then there were also 200, and they were all falling under 200.
There were also 220 fans.
Yeah. And so that the thinking was like, okay, well, to make a fan the same width as most cases are about 200mm. That's great. Like, this is going to be your peak fan size. You're going to go from an 80 to a 120 to a 140.
Theoretically quieter.
Eventually you would ascend to a 200mm fan. But the problem was, first off, that meant that you had to take up Z height. So, like, you wouldn't be able to clear the motherboard and have a 200mm fan unless you had a very tall or very wide case. Then you had bearing issues. These blades were very heavy, and so you needed a heavier duty bearing to run them, but that costs money, and consumers generally don't want to spend more money on top of the already increased amount for the fan blade. So, to buy a good 200mm fan could be $25, $30. And then on top of that, radiator support wasn't very good.
There's no radiator support.
Yeah, I know. Like, if you look even at 140s, it was difficult to get good fans for 140mm radiators for a while. To do it with 200 was like very difficult. So
I mean, optimally, you'd have a radiator the same width as the fan, but also they're not really static pressure optimized. They're too big.
So you weren't it'd fit on there, but you wouldn't see the same performance. So I think Cooler Master's maybe chasing something that's not really there anymore with those 200mm fans, but
that'll be an interesting one because I think the case will.
It looks okay.
I think it'll sell because there's a lot of interest in it.
It does a good job showing off the RGB LEDs.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is centralizing your LEDs in kind of just two spots in the front, so you don't see all the individual diodes like you would with three front fans. They've got the big clear like acrylic window or whatever it is. I think there's tempered glass on one side. So they've got a lot of the design elements that people want, or at least that the industry's trending in.
What's the price on it?
I think it's supposed to be $150. So that's where it's like...
That's the question, though, is it's like when consumers stopped buying SUVs. Like, it might just be too expensive. I don't know anybody who's buying cases over $130 nowadays.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, there's a lot of... Just like, the interesting thing is, we can look at things like coverage viewership.
Yeah.
And I can look at the coverage of, a great example is our Vega coverage, and we got more views on the review than products that have shipped to date.
Yeah.
Right? And so, and there's probably more interest in the product expressed online than ever will people will buy it. There's more interest in the H500P, I think, than will be expressed in dollars spent buying it. And so it's really hard to gauge right now how well it'll perform.
When you're a case PM, this is like the biggest difficulty too, because you want to be a part of the community, so you join like overclockers.net, right. Power Up, your OCUK,
subreddits.
Subreddits, Build a PC, and you hear all these things. And if you hear them twice in a day, you're like, this is the thing I need to put into my case. And then 8-10 months later, you put it out, and people are like, oh, I'm going to buy this case because of these things. And then it's just the comments section. Like,
yeah, they don't actually buy it.
That's probably one of the most
only the commenters buy it.
Yeah,
which is still not a lot of people.
Because it's such a subjective product. People are very vocal about it. You may have won over those comment section people, but they're not always right.
But that's on a magnitude also of hundreds, not of thousands.
Yeah.
And hundreds doesn't pay for cost.
And at the end of the day, I don't know if your viewers have a good sense, but you need to be selling like 3,000 to 7,000 of these a month to make it worth your while. Like, you can sell less if it's a rebranded product like those Jones bows.
Or
it
like
doesn't really matter.
A Halo product where you don't really care.
Yeah, you build everything into the cost. But if you're coming to the market and you've spent months, years of R&D, a lot of effort into your design and features and your marketing, you need to be shipping at least 3,000 easy to try to recoup your money. And you start to think that you need to ship 3,000 a month for several years. That's a really wide audience, and it takes a really special product to get that kind of attention.
Yeah, and that's why you get so much tooling reused too.
It's definitely why companies are more afraid of spending money on tooling for cases.
Right. So what's our recap here? What are the things that I would like to see airflow improved on the front panels? I would really like for companies, like when we post reviews, we've started including frequency trend lines now.
Yeah.
Because just saying it's hotter doesn't work with these people.
Yeah.
Like, you got to show that it's losing something in addition to being hotter. So GPU temperature, we can ramp the fan to 70% and it's fine.
Maybe we need
But do you want a 60 dBA fan in your case?
Maybe you need to do like a summarized performance metric for cases, that a number for the decibel level, a number for the thermal level,
right.
And then like a subjective
like a
ID level,
report card.
Yeah. Something so that you could categorize these cases. I think the case industry is going to be booming soon, though, just because of the we've got all these new processors coming out.
Coffee Lake.
Yeah,
Threadripper.
Coffee Lake is supposed to be very, very good, and if it is that good, I think we'll see a lot of Sandy Bridge people upgrading, and you'll get this tidal wave of people ready to spend money on the industry. And I hope companies are ready with some new offerings to get them excited.
Yeah. What's, if you pick one thing out of the stack for improvement, what would you want people to work on?
I think it's designing for the core competency. It's making the core
for that specific company.
It's a case. The case's job, in my mind, actually isn't housing the components. It's making the building process better.
Ease of installation?
Ease of installation, and then the final product aesthetics, that the computer looks good.
Right.
We always figured out how to make the next case when we do the show builds with the current case. So like a CES Computex builds, when your hands are all bloody and cut up and you're trying to snip off zip ties that shouldn't be mounted to certain parts of the case, and then you're like, I'll add a zip tie point here. Oh, we should pre-install the standoffs. Oh, we should make this out of metal, not plastic.
Should add Velcro.
Oh, exactly. And a fan hub is just as good as a fan controller. That kind of stuff. I want to see a return to core competency.
All right, thank you, Rob, for joining me.
No problem, Steve.
We'll see you all next time.